On October 30th, 1974, at exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, in the stuffy, humidity-soaked locker room of a stadium in Kinshasa, Zaire, something was happening that was destined to remain forever behind the scenes of sports chronicles. In this room, the air did not smell of warming ointment or leather gloves, but of a sticky animal fear that could not be hidden even behind the darkest sunglasses. You are used to seeing Muhammad Ali shouting, dancing, spewing curses and promises to destroy his opponent. But if you had peeked into that room an hour before the walkout, you would have seen a picture to make your blood run cold. His entourage, the very people who had fed from his hands for years, were behaving not like cornermen before the fight of the decade, but like relatives in an ER waiting room awaiting an inevitable verdict. His brother Rahman was quietly crying in the corner, his face buried in his hands, and his personal physician, Ferdy Pacheco, was checking the contents of his medical bag with such nervousness, as if he were preparing not to stitch up cuts, but to restart a stopped heart right in the ring. Why were they burying him alive? The answer lay behind a thin wall in the neighboring locker room, where a creature was warming up whom the sports journalists of the time refused to call human. 25-year-old George Foreman, a monster who knew no defeat, a killing machine who had destroyed Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, the only two men who had managed to beat Ali in just 2 incomplete rounds. The world was certain. Ali was an old man, his reflexes had faded, his legs had become heavy, and stepping out against Foreman was not just a sporting risk. It was a sophisticated method of committing public suicide in front of 1 billion TV viewers. Even the pilots of Ali's private jet sat in the cockpit with engines warmed up on the runway, not to fly the winner home, but to emergency evacuate his mangled body to a neurosurgical center in Madrid, if he survived the night at all. You think Ali didn't know about this plane? He knew everything, but this is where the story takes a sharp turn that breaks the logic of what was happening. While everyone around him trembled, he sat in absolute, ringing silence, and this silence frightened his team more than Foreman's shouts. It seemed he had resigned himself to execution, but no one present noticed a tiny, critically important detail that occurred just 40 minutes before the fight began, when the legendary trainer Angelo Dundee decided to check the condition of the ring. This is that very dagger you will remember in the finale. Dundee climbed onto the canvas and discovered a catastrophe. The ropes enclosing the ring, under the influence of the monstrous African heat and humidity, had stretched and sagged, turning into soft jelly. For a boxer of Ali's style, whose life depends on speed, maneuverability, and bouncing off the ropes, this was a death sentence, because it is impossible to push off such ropes. They do not spring. They are viscous as a swamp. Dundee, white with horror, grabbed a wrench and was about to call the workers to tighten the ropes until they rang like guitar strings, thereby saving his charge's life. But at that moment, the unthinkable happened. Ali, who seemed to be immersed in a trance, suddenly appeared nearby, placed a heavy hand on his trainer's shoulder, and quietly but firmly ordered, "Leave them." Do you hear the sound of the paradigm shattering? Any normal person would have demanded the mistake be fixed to have at least some chance of running away from the monster. But Ali voluntarily, consciously deprived himself of the only route of retreat. He forbade tightening the ropes. He chose the trap. At that moment, Dundee looked into the eyes of his champion and saw not fear, but the mad, cold calculation of a gambler betting not just money, but his own life on zero, understanding something unavailable to mere mortals. But what exactly this old man had planned? Locking himself in a cage with soft walls alone with a killer, no one could understand until the first stroke of the gong. The gong tears through the humid air of Kinshasa, and in that same second, the first betrayal of expectations occurs, causing 80,000 spectators in the stadium to gasp in astonishment. Instead of starting his famous dance, instead of circling around the clumsy giant, Ali rushes straight to the center of the ring, towards his death. You thought he would run, saving his legs. No, he takes a suicidal step. He throws a straight right, the lead right. A punch considered a forbidden move in boxing against a powerhouse like Foreman, because it leaves you open to a counter sledgehammer. The hall howled as Ali's glove smashed into the monster's face. But this blow, which would have felled an elephant, produced the opposite effect. Foreman didn't even blink. He simply shook off the punch like a pesky fly, and in his eyes flashed not confusion, but a cold, predatory joy. The victim had walked into the trap on its own. And then begins the nightmare that makes commentators scream into their microphones, tearing their voices. Ali, realizing his speed is useless against this rock, begins to retreat backward to those very ropes he forbade tightening. You see this, and your brain refuses to believe it. Get away from there! Don't stand by the ropes! This scream hangs over the stadium because any novice knows, standing against the ropes against Foreman is like locking yourself in a phone booth with a live grenade. Ali presses his back against the enclosure, raises his hands in a tight guard, and freezes. He turns into a statue. He surrenders the initiative. He invites the executioner to begin the execution. Why is he doing this? It looks like capitulation, like an admission that his legs no longer hold him, and Foreman accepts the invitation with the enthusiasm of a butcher. The bombardment begins. Bam, bam, bam. The sounds of George's blows to Ali's body are like a baseball bat hitting a wet sandbag. Every hook, every uppercut is aimed to break ribs, rupture the spleen, turn innards into mincemeat. The audience closes their eyes, unable to watch this beating, for it seems Ali is simply accepting punishment for his audacity. But it is at this exact moment, when you are ready to believe in the end of the legend, that the plot twist occurs, reversing the polarity of the entire scene. Look closely at how Ali's body moves under the hail of blows. He does not stand rigidly. He leans back, using those very sagging, soft ropes as a shock absorber. He hangs outside the ring at an unthinkable angle, and Foreman's monstrous fists, designed to crack a skull, either whistle a millimeter from the target or lose their destructive energy at the very end of the trajectory, slapping against gloves rather than bone. You thought the ropes were a trap? No. Ali turned them into the only place on Earth where he could survive. But the price of this strategy was monstrous, for the kidney shot still landed, and the pain was so real it could be felt through the TV screen. Foreman has been punching for 10 minutes straight without stopping, his muscles engorged with blood. He is sure victory is a matter of seconds. But suddenly, in the middle of the 5th round, when the boxers come together in a clinch and their heads touch, something strange happens. The cameras catch a close-up. Ali's face is battered. He is breathing heavily, but his lips are moving. You expect to hear a groan? A plea for mercy? Instead, he whispers right into the ear of the breathless giant a phrase that destroys Foreman's psyche more than any punch. "Is that all you got, George?" Foreman's eyes widen in horror. He has just played all his aces. He hit as he had never hit in his life, and the old man is not just standing, he is mocking him. In that moment, the hunter realizes for the first time that Ali is not the one locked in the cage. He is locked in there himself, and his strength is draining away with every second like water into sand, while Ali continues to hang on the ropes, absorbing the pain and waiting for that single moment when the monster's heart begins to falter from overload. By the 8th round, the air above the ring had thickened so much it seemed one could cut it with a knife. But what was happening inside the square of ropes resembled a slow-motion train wreck more than a sporting contest. George Foreman, that same indestructible titan who an hour ago seemed cast in bronze, now moved with the grace of a drunken sailor on deck during a storm. His arms, filled with leaden fatigue, hung like whips, and breath tore from his chest with such a wheeze that the microphones in the front rows picked it up. You look at this and ask yourself, did Ali's plan work? Is it really possible to let yourself be beaten for 20 minutes just so the enemy exhausts himself? But don't be too quick to rejoice, because it is at this moment, when the viewer's vigilance is lulled by the sluggish pace of the fight, that a microscopic change occurs in Ali's posture, noticed only by professionals. He suddenly ceases to be the victim. He peels himself off those saving ropes that had dug into his back for 7 rounds straight, and the veil of pain disappears from his eyes, giving way to the icy, surgical concentration of a sniper who has finally caught the target in his crosshairs. You think he will rush into an attack now? No. He takes a step back, causing Foreman, staggering from exhaustion, to fall into the void with yet another clumsy swing, and this miss becomes the point of no return. At that moment, time at the 20th of May Stadium stops, and that visual silence I spoke of descends. 80,000 people simultaneously stop breathing. The roar of the crowd dissolves into a vacuum, and only the screech of rubber boxing shoes on the wet canvas is heard. In this unnatural silence, Ali delivers a blow that contradicts all laws of physics and fatigue, a lightning-fast combination, a right cross over Foreman's left hand, a punch of such purity and precision that it seems to have been rehearsed in a ballet class, not in the African jungle. The giant's head jerks, his body loses its axis of rotation, and here the most terrifying and majestic spectacle of the night occurs. Foreman does not fall immediately. He begins to crumble slowly in stages, rotating around his axis like a downed bomber or an old oak sawed through at the very base. You watch this fall and wait for the final brutality, because the instinct of any fighter is to finish, to destroy, to drive the nail into the coffin lid while the enemy is defenseless. Ali's right hand is already soaring into the air, ready to crash down on the falling king's open jaw to guarantee a knockout, to grind Foreman into dust. The viewer cringes in anticipation of a bloody resolution, but then something happens that breaks the fourth wall of understanding human nature and turns sport into an epic. Ali does not strike. His fist freezes a centimeter from Foreman's face, and he follows the opponent's body with his gaze until it crashes onto the ring canvas. Why did he stop? In that fraction of a second, when adrenaline should have flooded his reason, Ali saw that the fight was over, that the monster's spirit was broken, and landing an unnecessary blow would be beneath the dignity of a true ruler. He allowed Foreman to fall on his own, without touching him, and this gesture of mercy, this refusal of unnecessary violence in the moment of absolute triumph, rang louder than any gong strike, leaving the world in a state of shock. We expected a murder, but we saw a coronation where the new king showed greatness by sparing the defeated dragon right before the referee began the count that would change boxing history forever. The crash of George Foreman's body hitting the ring canvas was still echoing in the ears of 80,000 spectators, and the world had already begun to go mad, choking in hysteria from the miracle witnessed. But while referee Zach Clayton spread his arms, signaling the knockout, and the crowd broke through the cordon to touch the new deity, you must stop and ask yourself the single question that separates the layman from the expert. How was this even possible? You saw blood, you saw sweat, you saw the triumph of will, but your brain still refuses to understand the mechanics of this trick. For by all physiological laws, Ali should have died back in the 3rd round from ruptured internal organs. The answer lies not in magic and not in prayers, but in that very detail we spoke of at the beginning, in that dagger which seemed to us negligence by the organizers, but turned out to be the ultimate weapon of retribution. Remember the ropes sagging from the heat. Remember how Angelo Dundee wanted to tighten them, but Ali forbade it. Now, as the smoke clears, the puzzle comes together into a picture inducing an intellectual orgasm. What looked like a violation of safety rules was a brilliant engineering trap. If the ropes had been tightened to standard, rigid, and taut, Ali would have been pinned against a hard wall, and Foreman's blows, possessing the kinetic energy of a freight train, would have simply flattened his rib cage, leaving no room for maneuver. But the ropes were soft, pliable as a hammock, and that is exactly what saved his life. Here the effect of inverted reality kicks in. You thought Ali was hanging on the ropes out of weakness, but in reality, he was using their elasticity to lean back outside the ring a critical 10 to 15 centimeters. Does this seem like a trifle? In the world of boxing, these centimeters are the difference between a bruise and a coma. Foreman's monstrous fists, designed to punch through the target, lost their destructive power at the very end of their trajectory every time, either whistling a millimeter from the chin or slapping against gloves, having already expended all their acceleration potential. Ali turned the technical staff's error into a shock absorption system, forcing physics to work against brute force, and Foreman, without realizing it, spent 40 minutes beating the air in elastic cables, burning his oxygen for nothing. Do you realize the beauty of this design? It wasn't just a fight, it was a chess match, played in hell. The tactic that would later be named rope-a-dope was not born in a training camp. It was born right there, in the moment Ali felt the softness of the ropes and instantly rewrote the script of the fight. He allowed the world to consider him crazy. He allowed commentators to bury him live on air, just to lure the monster into deep water and drown him there. When Ali stood over the defeated giant and the stadium roared, "Ali, Bomay!" It was a moment of truth, not only for sports, but for the human spirit. We saw proof that intellect always, absolutely always beats brute force, even if it requires allowing oneself to be beaten for half an hour. In that instant, history divided into before and after, and everyone who considered Ali merely a talkative showman was forced to admit that before them was the greatest tactical genius of the 20th century, who turned his weakness and the flaws of the arena into an instrument of absolute crushing victory. The music fades, the crowd's cries of "Ali, Bomay" dissolve into white noise, and on the screen, instead of the young, radiant god of war, a completely different face appears, the face of an old man with a stone mask, whose hands, once the fastest on the planet, now tremble treacherously as he tries to light the Olympic flame in Atlanta in '96. You look at these frames and your heart clenches with pity, but I am not here to squeeze tears out of you. I am here to force you to see the terrible, uncomfortable truth hiding in the shadow of that great triumph in Zaire. We are used to calling the rumble in the jungle the pinnacle of sporting intelligence, but let's flip the coin and look at the price Ali paid for that night when he decided to outsmart physics. Doctors who examined Ali's brain years later came to a conclusion that makes one's skin crawl. It was that brilliant rope-a-dope tactic we admired 5 minutes ago that became the beginning of his end. You thought he walked out of the fight unharmed because he didn't fall. That is an illusion, a trick of the eye. Those hundreds of monstrous blows from Foreman that Ali took to the body and head while hanging on the ropes did not pass without a trace. They launched an irreversible process of destruction, microscopic hemorrhages that killed neurons in the substantia nigra of his brain year after year. The soap opera effect works here with cruel irony. What saved him from a knockout in 1974, his ability to endure superhuman pain, became the very poison that slowly killed him for the next 30 years. His personal physician, Ferdy Pacheco, the very man who checked the adrenaline in the locker room, left the team shortly after this fight because he saw what the fans did not see. Ali began to lose his reflexes. His speech slowed. His kidneys were beaten so badly that his urine turned the color of strong tea. Pacheco begged him to stop, but Ali, intoxicated by the myth of his own invulnerability, which he himself created that night in Kinshasa, refused to leave. He believed he could endure anything, and therein lies the main paradox. The victory over Foreman gave him eternity, but it also stole his voice. The Louisville Lip, the man who could outtalk anyone, found himself trapped in a body that refused to obey, and the silence that descended upon his life became the payment for that rumble in the jungle. Now that you know the full picture, when the euphoria of the knockout has been replaced by an understanding of the tragedy, I want to ask you a question that will divide you into two camps. Look at the scales of history. On one side is the title of the greatest, a legend that inspired millions, and that very moment of triumph that we re-watch to this day. On the other side are decades of illness, trembling hands, and a lost voice. Was this victory worth such a price? Was Ali's action that night an act of supreme courage, justifying any sacrifice for the sake of legacy? Or was it the madness of a proud man, suicide on the installment plan, committed by a person who didn't know when to stop? Who is he to you now? A tactical genius who outplayed death, or a victim of his own ambitions who voluntarily stepped into disability for the sake of applause? This is not just a question about boxing. It is a question about the meaning of human life. Write your opinion in the comments right now. Genius or suicide? I will be waiting for your verdict.